Hello everyone. Today I am also starting a video series maybe for model games of the 1e4 e5 repertoire, which was just published like a little bit more than 2 months ago. So it's a repertoire for the black pieces, and yeah, basically everything after 1e4 e5 is covered. So in this game, which was played very recently, like maybe 2 weeks ago or something, in the German championship between Hushenbet Niklas and Vincent Keymer. So it's one of the lines of the repertoire, and it's one of the, so to say, rare lines, or not really employed at the highest level. So it was really great to see that such a great theoretician like Vincent Keymer used it in his game, and his opponent, who was, for example, second of Hikaru Nakamura, also knew the theory in this line. So yeah, it's a very interesting game. So let's see how it went. All right, so starts as the Italian, knight to f6, and now instead of d3, which could lead to slower type of games. If you have the repertoire, you know that it's not happening in our case, but in this game, knight g5 was played. So this attacking variation, which is maybe rather defensive variation once black is sacrificing the pawn. So d5, ed, knight a5, bishop b5 check, c6, takes. This is the main line so far in the Polerio defense, and here bishop d3, which looks a little bit unusual, but it's explained in the repertoire why this move is the most popular these days. If the bishop goes somewhere else, like to e2, for example, then after h6, this knight leaves to f3, and it's much easier to for black to push this important e4 move and gain tempo on this knight. While in case of bishop d3, h6, you can say that this square is prepared for the knight. So actually, it's already not even so good for black in this moment. So on bishop d3, the move is different. Black attacks the knight with knight to d5. So this way. Now the knight goes back to f3. I mean, going back to e4 is now again kind of illogical, because it just invites f5, e4, or knight f4 attacking the bishop. So it's not good. But again, in the case of knight f3, you can see that this bishop is covering the square. So that's the whole point of this variation. Now bishop d6, castles, rook e1. So we are already at move 11, but still a lot of games played from this position. The theory basically just starts. Black sacrificed the pawn, and basically at this moment has to decide which type of compensation he wants for it. Or yeah, actually rather it's this moment where black has to decide. So one of the main lines is knight to f4, with the plan of doubling the pawns and playing for the bishop pair compensation. Very playable line for black also. And after castle rook e1, it's going to be a sharper game. And okay, by far the main move is to play f5 with a lot of crazy theory to follow. I mean, I will just show you the the main line, so to say. So black gives up one more pawn and now just starts to push like g5 and g4 and so on. I mean, it looks very good, but unfortunately, if white knows up to this moment, then probably he will know a little bit more, and then it's not really about black's attack, but some 25 moves long variation, which just leads to some very, very crazy positions. I mean, it's obviously fine for black, but a little bit computerish. That's why eventually this was not recommended in the repertoire. But bishop g4 was recommended, which also looks like a very normal move, just to develop the bishop and that way protect the pawn on e5. And later black wants to push f5 and e4 here as well, but not giving up the pawn on e5. So the good thing about this move, for example, is that this computer analysis on lichess immediately gives it a dubious sign. So it's like not good move, but deeper analysis shows that it's like a perfectly good move. So you can easily surprise your opponents with this move and get a very good position. And again, since Keymer used it in German Championship, it just gives even more confidence that it's fully playable. So in this game, Hushenbet immediately played bishop f1. The critical variation is probably h3, but the line goes with bishop takes on f3, queen takes on f3, and now f5. Yeah, so this position is obviously very critical for this variation, and it's analyzed further in the course. Now, of course, I mean, since the game was different, I will not go into much detail, but bishop f1 was played, now f5 and d3. So yeah, basically this is already like very, very rare territory. Only a couple of games were played here. The course reaches this position, obviously. I mean, white's moves were like not so strange or anything. I mean, so white has an extra pawn, but white also has 6 pieces just waiting to join the game. Why black has already space advantage in the center and trying to initiate even some quick attack with e4 in some cases. But okay, white's argument is that okay, since basically they did not move any pieces, that how would it be possible that they have weaknesses? So that's also a reasonable argument. So the position is just very complicated and in my opinion playable for both sides. And yeah, here there are a lot of moves for black which are possible, and it's kind of great that these were mainly not tested at all, so it will be like a novelty for your opponent in either way. In the course, the recommendation is queen b6, saying something that black has a lot of different options as well, but the point of queen b6 is that it targets the f2 square. So anytime after e4, d, fe, the f file opens up, there could be maybe something on f2, and it also prepares a square for the rook in order to support e4. So this is a very direct approach. I believe it's quite good for black, but yeah, there are many other moves. For example, the computer's first choice is rook c8 in this position. I mean, that's not something I like, because it's okay, it's a waiting move. That part I understand, but to my understanding, it's not the most useful waiting move. So in this game, Keymer played h6 without spending any time, so still in preparation. And honestly, I did not understand this move at the first sight, and maybe not even at the second. Because why exactly we wait with h6? I mean, it's clearly a waiting move, right? So it's, I mean, maybe in some lines knight g5 or bishop g5 was annoying. I mean, it's hard to believe, but who knows? And there must be a reason this h6 was played, and for example, not a, I would say, more reasonable waiting move like rook b8, for example, just bringing the rook to the file, or playing king h8, which just goes out from this diagonal, so it certainly should be very useful. But actually, these moves are, I believe, after analyzing these positions, are somewhat worse than what Keymer did. Okay, so let's start with moves which I don't like so much, or like why this thing of waiting makes any sense. I mean, so one point is that black has basically one bad piece in this position. Try another color. So the knight on a5. So the thing here is that, okay, bringing it back to the game is quite obvious. So black should play c5 and then bring the knight back to c6, and if possible, then even to d4. So that would be one nice way to do it. The problem, however, is that if black plays c5 right away, then there is this idea of knight c3, which is a little bit unpleasant. So why it is unpleasant? Because if the pawn is on c6, then black needs no reaction whatsoever, because the trade is just fantastic on d5. One pawn gets to d5, and then e4 will be super easy. However, here it's not possible anymore. And for example, I mean, bringing backwards the knight just gives some free time for white. So most likely knight takes, b takes. And this is another thing which I don't like that much, that this pawn gets to c3, so this knight is never getting to d4 anymore. So this is just a very nice trade for white in this case. So this is one reason that it's such a sharp position that it's difficult to make a rule of thumbs or anything like that. But probably we don't play c5 with black until this knight is not developed to d2. So we don't really want to face this knight c3, with the pawn on c5. So that's why this move is, let's say, not so good, in my opinion. I mean, it's still playable move, but it's not that good. So, for example, if black plays rook b8, it can be a little bit empty move, because the rook is rather needed on d8 or e8 in order to push e4. This bishop is not developing anywhere. b2 is covered in this case. Now, obviously, white will go to d2, not to c3, because again, if knight c3, then it's a free move for black. So just play bishop c7, for example. Plan is queen d6 and attack on the diagonal. This trade is just awful for white. So this is important to know. But yeah, white rather plays knight bd2, maybe then wants to play c3, b4 at some moment. Yeah, rook b8 is not really doing much regarding the king side. So yeah, king h8, I would say, is a very reasonable waiting move, as I said, just going out from the diagonal. But here there are two things which are possible for white. I mean, and mainly I would say what I don't like is when white goes h3, black goes bishop h5. So obviously, if we are not forced to take, then we are not taking. I mean, or if we cannot follow it up, with some really nice attack, then we don't take on f3. So yeah, bishop h5 is logical, and now white can play a move bishop e2. And yeah, basically at this moment, it's kind of clear that why, if Keymer decides to wait, why he didn't choose king h8, but he did h6. So the problem here is that if, now e4 is possible, but knight g5 is also possible. And the problem here is that there is gonna be a trade on e2. And after, let's say, rook e2, not only the e4 pawn is hanging, but there is also this threat of knight e6. So it's kind of unpleasant to deal with these two things. So another move which is possible is queen f6, just to protect the pawn on e5, and now knight g5 is not a tempo anymore, so it's not so good. But here white has another nice idea to play bishop g5. Bishop looks very awkward on g5, but it's not staying there for long. After queen g6, bishop d2. Excellent play from white, attacking the knight and also threatening, you know, such jumps with the knight. So it's already a very bad position for black. I mean, this 95 is just a big threat. And for example, if, you know, black just ignores things and plays c5 just to illustrate the point, then there is this knight takes e5, and obviously the bishop is unprotected on h5, and after the trade now there is nothing, so it's just 2 pawns down for black, and knight c3 is coming next, and knight can just defend on f3, and white is winning the game. So this is the reason, you know, this knight g5 and sometimes bishop g5, bishop d2, that it's important to actually cover this this square on g5 by h6. So it's a very clever move, and again, I mean, it's obviously Keymer is coached by Peter Leko. I'm sure that they spent quite a bit of time on this position to figure out what to play. I'm having said that, I'm still confident about queen b6, but h6 as an alternative move if you want, very interesting. But I also looked at queen f6. It's also perfectly possible, actually. It's again can be a little bit sharper thing, and, you know, like some more complicated lines, but yeah, it's also a move. Okay, so h6 was played. Now we kind of know why. And white played knight d2. So white had many different options here. For example, obviously knight c3 is there. But yeah, here what I said, that it just doesn't matter. It's black's choice now. Bishop c7, queen d6 is one plan. Other is to play queen f6 and bring the rook to the center. But the knight is, you know, if it cannot take on d5, and it cannot really, then it's not good on d3. I mean, because it's not doing anything. On d2 it supports f3, so in some way it, you know, helps with the queen to move out maybe in the other diagonal. But okay, I personally maybe would play bishop c7 here. This idea of queen d6 with e4 looks pretty dangerous already, I would say. So that is one move to make. Obviously white can play h3, then it's bishop to h5 and bishop to e2. So this idea, which, you know, I also showed you in the line with king h8, but now the difference is that after e4 the knight is not jumping to g5. This is just huge difference. And if the knight is jumping to d4, it's, you know, for example, bishop takes e2, rook e2, and then the queen is coming with a tempo to f6, and it's already advantage black. You know, some basically 5 pieces are already in the attack. Computer sometimes already wants to sacrifice with e3 just to even further weaken the dark squares on the king side. So yeah, really nice position in general. And yeah, in case white would take this pawn, it's even worse, because now f2 is a target. So some queen f6 is coming, or bishop c5. This is already very dangerous. So yeah, this is the advantage of h6. So white, so h6, knight d2. This is what white decided to play, and c5 right now. So according to the thing, that there is no knight c3 anymore. Now Keymer is ready to bring back this knight into the game if possible. White played c3, knight c6. And now knight to c4. So basically opening the bishop and trying to put some pressure on the e5 pawn. Okay, dropping back the bishop is obviously like very natural. I mean, why should black ever allow knight takes d6, bishop c7, and now knight e3, also logical. So basically white has much less space thanks to these pawns here. So trading a few minor pieces should help. I mean, the argument on the other side could be that this knight is already making 3 moves. And I believe what is a little bit painful for white that it's not traded on c3. So it was like previously it was clear that after knight takes on c3, bc, that pawn was doing an excellent job of restricting this knight there, but okay, now maybe b2 pawn can be a little bit problematic, although it's not a huge deal, but I believe that formation is quite strong for white. So now Keymer took on e3, bishop takes, attacking the pawn on c5, so queen d6, but this is kind of a dream setup for black. So we have this attack on the h2 pawn, and yeah, already in some cases like bishop f3 combined with d4 is a threat. So white played queen b3 check, getting out of this super annoying pin. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of the first moment when Keymer made a mistake, but it's super difficult. I mean, you have to, like, I don't know. I mean, it's really kind of impossible to figure this out. And he didn't even spend much time at this moment, which he normally does. I mean, he normally does spend time in such position. So, like, where would you put the king? I mean, okay, it's pretty obvious that we don't want to play rook f7, even though computer says it's a better move than what Keymer did. But yeah, rook f7, we don't want to self-pin the rook. It's not how we play. So king goes to h7 or king goes to h8. Like, which one is more logical? I would say definitely king h8 is more logical because we want to open the game with e4 at some moment. And okay, if we play e4, then after let's say some trades, this diagonal is getting exposed for black a little bit. So we don't want to put the king on h7. Also, maybe in some lines, knight g5 could be a check. Like if the bishop is unprotected on h5. So that's another reason. So king h8 looks safe, but yeah, the position is super concrete, and for one very specific reason, king h7 was actually a much better move than king h8. So let's start with what Keymer did. King h8. And now white immediately also went wrong because it's just very complicated, and it's not so easy to navigate these complications, especially when your king is under attack. So white played queen c4. I mean, the idea is correct, but queen a3 was the right square to attack this pawn on c5 with bishop takes on c5. So now the line is the following. I mean, obviously black's goal is not to protect it with bishop b6, because then the whole, like if you play something like bishop b6, then the whole concept of attacking the king is just out of the window. Knight is coming to c4, pawn to f3. We are down a pawn and likely to lose. So this is not what we want. What we want is to take on f3. So now white takes on c5, queen goes to f6, bishop takes f8, rook f8, and gf3. So now white is up in exchange, but okay, the king has been weakened. Now queen to g5 check, king h1. And okay, black has some chances, against a weak king like this, but honestly, I don't know how difficult to protect. I mean, it's quite difficult to defend this position for white because computer says queen a6 is the correct move, which somehow try to defend like this with the queen to c8 and target this bishop. I mean, I wouldn't say it's the most obvious way to defend, but objectively speaking, yeah, white is doing well in this position. And yeah, this is the position which I want you uh, to highlight. So just look at this position. So king h1 and black plays rook f6 in this position, right? So let's see in the case of king h7. Queen to a3, bishop takes on f3, bishop takes c5, queen f6, bishop f8, rook f8, exactly the same variation, gf3, queen to g5, king to h1. Now comes the difference that this rook is not hanging with the check, thanks to the king being on h7. So black has this wonderful move of queen f4, just preparing this attack on h2 and closing any opportunities with the f pawns to block it, to block this threat. And once queen f8 is played, then e4 is played, and the checkmate is unstoppable unless white wants to sacrifice the queen on f5. So it's a really nice variation, and the whole point is that this rook is not taken with a check. It's an extremely difficult variation, I have to say. So, but I also have to mention that after gf3, queen g5, obviously king h1 is the ideal move, not to pin yourself, but if you pin yourself with bishop g2, the game is still playable for white, even though it's extremely dangerous now because the bishop is pinned and rook g6 is coming. White still has to play some really tough defensive moves in order to stay in the game, but objectively black is doing pretty well. All right, I am just showing this that to illustrate how like how big of a difference such a move can make. And obviously this is like maybe a rather an exception to the rule that when the more natural move is a mistake here. Yeah, so Ushanbet went with queen c4. This is also not ideal. Okay, queen a3, as I showed, was correct. Now Keymer took on f3, gf3. And okay, now the position again changed a lot. So white's king side is quite weak, and black is still down a pawn, but it's obvious that there is very nice compensation. So now it already doesn't really matter if that we are down a pawn, since thanks to this weakness of the king, there is a long-term compensation. So we don't have to be so precise to keep this compensation. I mean, this king will be not safe in the near future. So Keymer played queen g6 check, which is not normal. Also, I just want to highlight a nice move, which is knight to d4. Sometimes it's interesting to make such moves with the idea that if c takes, then e takes, and this diagonal is once again opening up. Queen g6 was also good. Bishop g2. He played rook b8, b3, rook f6, so trying to bring the rook to g6 mainly. King h1 is logical. Queen h5, h3 also nice defensive move. So now this idea of attacking on h2 is not there anymore. Rook g6, rook g1, rook d8. I mean, I believe it's clear that black's play is much easier and probably much more fun to attack than to protect that weak king. Now rook to e1 was played. And I believe this is a critical moment here where actually black is clearly better here, but the move is not easy, but it's very, I wouldn't, okay, in some ways thematic, but it's like, you normally see such things in books, and if you can do such thing in your game, then you are a little bit surprised and you cannot believe that it works. So there is this concept of attacking the strongest point in the position. And okay, for white, I would say it's e4. It's hard to make an argument for another square, so it's protected once. Okay, let's see another color. Once with this pawn, once with this pawn. Bishop obviously has an X-ray on it, so that also counts. Queen, that's already 4, and even the rook is looking towards that square, so it looks like that's really, protected very well. So obviously the move that black should play is e4. And yeah, it's a very nice sacrifice. It's basically opens this diagonal. That's 1 point, and there is also positional point to create this square for the knight on e5, and the lines are just working out very nicely. For example, if f pawn takes, which is the worst recapture, then f4 is coming. If the bishop moves, then f3 is already deciding the game. So white has to take on c5, but after queen h4, it's probably just lost. I mean, computer is trying to defend this, but honestly, it's very hard to believe. So yeah, again, f3 is coming, or obviously the bishop is hanging. This position is just, I believe, impossible to save. So it's rather better to take with the d pawn. So this f pawn cannot run. F pawn still goes to f4. Now the bishop has to go back. Bishop c5 is worse, as you will see from this line which I'm showing. So bishop c1, knight to e5. Now the queen goes back. I mean, queen takes c5 wouldn't make too much sense. I mean, rook g2 is immediately winning, but okay, bishop b6 with this idea is even simpler, I would say. So queen goes back, and now knight d3. So that's why I said taking on c5 is not good, because now the bishop would just hang, and also the rook is hanging. So rook d1 and rook g to d6. And it's quite a nice position. Black is down 2 pawns, but completely dominating thanks to this knight on d3. Queen h4 is coming with ideas of knight f2. And you can see that the bishop on c1 and bishop on g2 are just completely useless pieces. I mean, the game continues. It's not completely over, but yeah, it's pretty much a disastrous position for white. So Keymer missed this chance. He went knight to e7. I mean, it's also logical, right? So basically the two moves are the same. He wants a better square for the knight, and instead of e4, which was actually good, he tries this way. But yeah, this was not so good. I mean, now white blundered. I mean, he was also low on time with queen f7, but white could also play a move like bishop f4, just using this this attack on the knight, and then there is nothing better than to repeat and then maybe find d4, who knows. But the problem is that, white is not obliged to repeat, but can bring the bishop here, and that's a good defender. So yeah, actually this bishop f4 would have been a nice move. So instead white went queen f7, allowing to Vincent to have a big advantage, but not easy, obviously, to find these wins. He went bishop d6, which is not correct. That was a very nice way to get much better position, to play knight to d5. And yeah, now it's a huge trouble. And first of all, this pawn can be hanging sometimes, but yeah, it's not the main thing, obviously. But yeah, it's just simply very difficult to make moves for white, and c4 is the most logical move. And okay, we could look for other moves, but really there is nothing which makes more sense than c4, and it's really at least attacking the knight. And he had a brilliant win here, again connected with this e4 move. So e4 with the point that once c takes d5 is played, then rook takes g2 is played. So that's why this queen f7 was not good, because now the queen is hanging, and once the queen is captured, then black plays this rook h2, checkmate. So yeah, it would have been really nice to win like this. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. It's really nice variation. So yeah, instead Vincent went bishop d6, and okay, game continued for a long time. It was actually 62 moves. He won at the end. It was equal. Some moment, then he was better than equal. Yeah, it's already not too interesting, I would say. So I already showed two moments where he had chances to get big advantage here, and yeah, I believe very complicated and very interesting game with this, starting with this h6 idea, and yeah, it worked out pretty well for black. It looks quite difficult to play this variation for white. All right, so thanks for watching this video, and see you in some other one.